What was your wow, this really is a small world moment? After all, once went to a massagist in the town next to mine. We were talking and I found out she knew my dad and my biology teacher BC. They were from the same running group and the teacher went there before. Also, don't know if this applies, but found out my great-grandmother was a cousin of a famous writer in my country. Bumped into Osama bin Laden while shopping. A friend of mine was showing my wife and I a video of a church conference that took place about 5 years ago. My wife was watching and said, "Hey, I think that's me." She was in the background of that video. We didn't even know these people at the time this video was recorded. Applied for a nannying position on the CARE website. Found out the mom was best friends with my old high school English teacher, my favorite teacher. My uncle is currently dating my friend's aunt. So whenever I travel internationally, which was more often before the pandemic, I'd wear a Buffalo Bills hat/shirt something. No matter where I was on the planet, from Qatar, to Tanzania, to all over Europe, someone would come up to me and commiserate with me about the Bills. I was at university in another city, found home, and found out that my soon-to-be roommate was the classmate sitting next to me in high school, whom I had lost contact with. Went to an Elton John concert with my mom and we were sitting 2 rows back from someone she knew. My fiancé and I were buying tickets for a Rammstein concert. It took forever because they were selling out so fast, so we were clicking a ton until we got to. A few hours later we called a friend to see if they happened to get their tickets and they did. When we told each other where our seats were, they are sitting directly next to us. The stadium is huge, no clue how the hell that happened. Damn COVID. I wanna see my boys. I was in a backpackers hostel in Lesotho and I ran into a guy I knew from my hometown in the Netherlands. My parents live in a small town in Kentucky. They went to a resort in Mexico and ran into a couple from the same town. Live in Canada, I used to travel for work. I went to the UK, landed in London and rented a car to drive to the job. Stopped at a highway rest stop on the M1 and got some McDonald's, went outside and ran into my next door neighbor from Canada. Terraria Small World, 1.4. I took a trip there the Caribbean once, ate something that gave me crazy gas. Blew a hell fart. 4 days later Katrina hit New Orleans. A butterfly flaps its wings. Over 1 million Earths can fit into our sun. Had a random person add me on social media. From their posts etc. I gathered that they were at least in the same region of my country. Never spoke to them. I'm hammered at 3 AM and see them post about how they're becoming friends with my ex. Safe to say I decided hell nah and deleted them. Scared me a little bit because I'd cut ties with everyone associated with her pretty much. My first girlfriend's mom and my mom used to work together and were friends when they were pregnant with us. On my honeymoon I ran into my high school girlfriend at a resort in the Caribbean. One evening my wife was taking a nap, so I thought that I would just go out on the balcony and take in the view. I look over to my left, and there was Gina. I had not seen or spoken to Gina in at least 8 years at that time. Turns out Hachi was there on her honeymoon as well. So it is a pretty small world when your high school girlfriend is in the next room over and you are both pretty far from home on your honeymoon. Took a work trip down to Bali, Indonesia, worked in the travel industry at the time. On the return journey had to change aircraft in some small airport in Indonesia, can't remember where, which, for passengers, was little more than a massive shed. Was only there for about an hour. And there was a friend from university days I had not seen for years. In a shed I was only in for an hour, on the literal other side of the world. During my childhood, I moved around a lot. From ages 6 to 13 I lived in this one house, but unfortunately we had to move. I loved that house despite all the family arguing and other stuff while growing up. Cut to now, I'm 26. My BF and I are talking to his family friends at a small party last week. Turns out they now live in my childhood home and they claim it's haunted. We were on holiday in a town around 200 miles from home. One afternoon in a pub there was just us and one other couple, who were talking to the barman. We overheard the couple say what we remember about our hometown is. So we sort of joined in the conversation. Turned out the couple lived around 20 miles from our hometown and the barman wasn't a barman at all, just looking after the pub for his parents for the weekend. He was actually a policeman from our hometown. About 7 years later I got a job working at the local police station and ended up working with him. My dad was South African, had his own business. One day a new customer came in, who was also South African, from the same city, roughly of a similar age. So they got talking, did you go to so-and-so place, did you know so-and-so person, etc. A few hours later, this customer returns and asks for my dad. Look, he says, I went home, dug around, and found this. It's an old photo of a birthday party. It's a group photo, in black and white, was probably about 1935, of some boys, maybe 10 years old, all posed nicely for the camera. That, he says, pointing to one of them, is me. And that, pointing to another, is you. This man and once, and only once, met my father, 50 years earlier, on another continent, and had a photo of the event. Edit: I don't think I made it clear that the above encounter took place in England, not South Africa. 1989, I was in Toronto and bought a pink Northern Reflections sweatshirt. 1993, I was wearing it when I walked into the Ilwe Caves gift shop in Ballyvaughan, County Clare, Ireland. The girl behind the counter was wearing the same sweatshirt. Climbed a mountain / scrag in another country and met a guy from my hometown sitting on a rock. I was in China with my parents. My dad got a headache and went to a pharmacy to buy some pills. The box seemed oddly familiar, so I looked for the company name. It was the company from my hometown. As a kid, this blew my mind. When I was one of 5 kids at a table in high school and 3 of us had the same birthday. When I found out my estranged cousin, who was almost always lived more than 1,000 miles from me, has been living less than a mile from me for the last year and works in the same industry. I have had no contact with him or his side of the family in almost 10 years and only found out from a random LinkedIn page. It was like, I know that name, where do I know that name from, looks at picture / holy shit. Went to see Ghost, a pale poor named Death, then went to get my blood drawn a couple of weeks later. The lady that was drawing my blood and I were making small talk and somehow Ghost got brought up. Turns out she went to the same show as me and our seats were only like a few spots apart. Left a job to go to the other side of the country and work somewhere else. Ended up working with the identical twin of the guy I worked with at the old job. I decided to change jobs a few years ago, moving from a small, declining city in Ohio to Chicago. I'm a pretty big introvert, so I don't have a large circle of friends or acquaintances to begin with. But being in a new city, knowing absolutely no one, I decided to try and make some friends. I used Meetup to attend a geek mixer a couple weeks after I moved. Like 20 minutes after I arrived, a casual friend from the same town shows up. Turns out he also moved in just a few weeks ago, also changing jobs. My friends started spamming my address as a joke in a Discord server of 30 strangers from all over the world. One person replied saying that there is such an address in his hometown. This is a Swedish town of 30k people. Me and that guy met up a while later and are now mates. I was traveling with a friend in Tibet and we decided to share a ride from Lhasa to the Nepalese border with 2 guys we met at our hostel. Turns out one of the guys' mother was my professor at university back in Canada. Born and raised in the USA, I was living and working in NYC. I was in line to speak to a teller at a bank in Amsterdam when I heard my name called, and it was a woman I had known in college in NYC. A coworker of mine has an even wilder story. He was in line at a bank in Lucca, Italy, the middle of nowhere, and he ran into a former colleague. 2 examples. 1. I'm from Kent in southeast England. I went to Aberdeen University, the furthest uni from my home without crossing a sea. In my first week there, I bumped into the same girl 3 times. It turned out she was from a town about 15 minutes away from mine. Not only that, we were both fencers. We trained at sister clubs and had the same coach who ran both clubs. We ended up being the men's and women's captain for the uni fencing team. 2. In the year before I went to uni, I was looking to go to New Zealand to play cricket for a year. I reached out to the captain of a club in Auckland. It turned out, he was from my town and played for my local rivals about 20 years ago. Went to Florida on vacation. Ended up in a small gift shop in Daytona and bought some postcards. A couple of weeks later I'm back in England and end up speaking to some random girl on IRC. Turns out she worked in that same gift shop and remembered me and the people I was shopping with. One of the weirdest coincidences I've ever had. Another one. Worked in Aylesbury for a while. My company ended up merging with another company. Turns out the owner of the new company is family from my hometown, which is this tiny little place called Boston. His mom and grandma were my granddad's next door neighbor growing up. Side note, my granddad absolutely despised his grandmother apparently, but I thought it would be impolite to bring that part up.
With